Usually when you hear a story about a massive historical discovery, there's this expectation of, I don't know, clarity. Like you have a map.
Right, a straight line from point A to point B.
Exactly. You draw the line, you find the treasure, and you claim the glory. It's totally binary. You know, you either found it or you didn't.
Which is how we prefer our history, honestly. I mean, it makes the narrative so much easier to digest.
But then you step into the glaring, sun-baked deserts of the 16th century American Southwest, and suddenly that neat little map just bursts into flames.
It really does. You're looking at a historical landscape driven entirely by rumors, mirages, and just sheer desperation.
Welcome to today's deep dive into Francisco Vázquez de Coronado's monumental 1540 expedition, and we have an incredible stack of sources to guide you through this today.
We really do. We're pulling from archaeological surveys from Texas and New Mexico, detailed historical analysis of 16th century Spanish armor, the translated 1540s journal of a soldier named Pedro de Castañeda.
Which is a wild read, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. And we're also using modern historical accounts of the region to tie it all together.
So our mission here is to peel back the popular myth of like the lone, shining conquistador. We are going to look at the gritty, terrifying reality of a moving city of thousands of people wandering into the unknown.
Driven by nothing but a rumor.
Right. And we'll see how modern archaeology is using literal breadcrumbs of rusted metal to retrace their steps. So let's unpack this. Where does a survival mission of this scale even begin?
Well, it actually starts with a shipwreck and a desperate 8-year walk.
8 years? That's just, wow.
Yeah. So in the early 1530s, 4 survivors of a disastrous Spanish expedition to Florida, including a man named Cabeza de Vaca and an enslaved Moor named Estevanico, they finally stumbled into Mexico.
After wandering through what is now Texas and the American Southwest, right?
Exactly. And when they finally arrived, they brought whispers. They told the Spanish colonists they had heard tales from Native Americans of 7 cities to the north, cities of unimaginable wealth.
You know, whenever I hear about these massive, doomed expeditions, I always wonder how rumors like that gain so much traction so fast.
It's a fair question.
But I guess you have to put yourself in the shoes of the Spanish leadership in Mexico at this time. I mean, they had just watched the Aztec Empire fall, bringing immense wealth to Spain.
Right, the precedent was there.
Yeah, and they had just heard about the Incas in Peru. So when someone says, hey, there's another wealthy empire to the north, their immediate thought is to assemble an army and go get it. But it wasn't just blind greed, was it?
Not entirely, no. The viceroy of New Spain, Antonio de Mendoza, was dealing with intense political and economic pressure. There were hundreds of restless, heavily armed, ambitious young gentlemen in Mexico.
Guys who had missed out on the conquests of the Aztecs and Incas.
Exactly. They were a massive liability. I mean, Mendoza needed somewhere to channel their violent energy. But he didn't just hand over a blank check right away. In 1539, he sent a scouting party first.
To verify the rumors.
Right. He dispatched a Catholic friar named Marcos de Niza, along with Estevanico, the Moorish survivor who already knew the land and the people, to act as a guide.
A scouting trip that, unfortunately, goes horribly wrong almost immediately.
Oh, totally. They traveled far ahead into the territory of the Zuni people in modern-day New Mexico. Estevanico went ahead of the main party, angered the locals, and was killed.
And the friar?
Friar Marcos was terrified. He didn't even enter the city. He viewed it from a distant hill, turned around, and fled all the way back to Mexico.
But upon his return, he claimed he saw a massive city.
Yeah, larger than Mexico City, sparkling in the sun. He called it Cibola.
I read that detail in the sources and immediately thought, well, that is the ultimate confirmation bias.
How so?
I mean, you have a guy who has just walked hundreds of miles through brutal desert terrain. He knows his guide was just killed. He is terrified.
Right.
But he wants to see a city of gold so badly. And if you've ever seen a multi-story, sun-baked adobe brick pueblo hit by the setting sun...
Oh, the mica in the clay.
Yes. The mica sparkles. In his desperate mind, that adobe literally transformed into glittering treasure. But it still begs the question, how did one exaggerated, terrified scouting report from a guy standing on a hill convinces a viceroy to fund a high-risk army?
The report was simply the spark that ignited all that pent-up tension we talked about. Mendoza appoints his close friend, Francisco Vázquez de Coronado, to lead the charge. And the sheer scale of the response is staggering.
It wasn't just a few nights on horseback, was it?
Not even close. Coronado was commanding over 350 Spanish soldiers, at least 1,300 Native American allies from central and western Mexico, Franciscan friars, women, children.
And didn't they bring a massive herd of animals?
Oh, a walking pantry. like 1,500 horses, cattle, and sheep. Moving nearly 2,000 humans and thousands of animals across uncharted, hostile desert is a logistical nightmare.
And we should definitely bust a major myth right here about what that moving city actually looked like.
It's the armor myth.
Yeah. Whenever I picture a conquistador, I see a guy sweating in 50 pounds of shining steel plate armor looking like a medieval knight. But our sources on 16th century armor paint a totally different picture.
Very few of these men actually had European chainmail or metal helmets.
Yeah.
It really comes down to pure physics and environmental adaptation.
Because of the heat.
Exactly.
Right.
Wearing heavy steel in the Arizona summer heat is a death sentence. The metal would literally cook you.
So what did they wear instead?
The expedition adapted. Most wore Central Mexican-style quilted cotton armor. It was thick, lightweight, and the layers of tightly woven cotton were actually highly effective at absorbing the kinetic energy of an arrow.
That's fascinating. And their weapons weren't entirely European either, right?
Right. They carried indigenous weapons like wooden swords edged with razor-sharp Pachuca obsidian from central Mexico. And their European weapons were surprisingly outdated.
The crossbows.
Yes. This is the last major expedition to use the crossbow in the Americas. It was already becoming obsolete in Europe in favor of early firearms.
That specific detail about the obsolete crossbows is going to be incredibly important for the archaeology later on. But for now, picture this bizarre, slow-moving caravan. Quilted cotton, obsidian swords, herds of sheep marching north for months.
Quite an image.
And then, in July 1540, the vanguard finally reaches Cibola, which we now know was the Zuni Pueblo of Hawikuh in New Mexico. And that sparkling golden dream shatters instantly.
The psychological whiplash must have been devastating. I mean, they are starving, exhausted from marching across a desert, and they finally arrive in the fabled 7 cities of gold.
Only to find a rock and mud masonry village.
Exactly. And it's defended by hostile Zuni warriors who are very much not interested in surrendering to an invading force.
There is no gold. There are no emeralds. Just a fierce battle for survival. Coronado is actually knocked off his horse and severely wounded by rocks thrown from the Pueblo roofs.
Yeah, they managed to take the village just to secure food, and they end up sending Friar Marcos back to Mexico in absolute disgrace.
Because food is so scarce, Coronado can't keep 2,000 people in one spot. He has to splinter his forces to find supplies and try to locate the naval fleet that was supposed to be running parallel to them.
And those desperate splinter missions resulted in some of the most significant geographical discoveries of the era.
Wait, if the whole point was gold and they realized immediately there was no gold, why not just cut your losses? Like, why double down and stay? Why not just march back to Mexico and call it a day?
The harsh mechanics of 16th century travel made that impossible. It was late summer, the journey back would take months.
And winter was coming.
Right. Winter was rapidly approaching, and trying to push 2,000 starving people and hundreds of animals over the mountains back into Mexico in the snow would have guaranteed a total wipeout. They were physically trapped.
So the mission shifted overnight.
Completely. From a glorious exploration for wealth into a desperate occupation just to survive the winter.
And that occupation turns incredibly dark. They move their main camp to an area called Tiguex near modern-day Bernalillo, New Mexico. They forcefully appropriate a Native American village called Cofor, kicking the residents out into the freezing cold.
It is a textbook example of how the sheer mechanics of conquest breed disaster. You have a very fragile desert ecosystem that carefully supports the local Pueblo people.
And then you add a massive army to it.
Suddenly, you drop 2,000 extra humans and thousands of grazing animals into that delicate balance. The breaking point was environmental.
And corn stalks.
Yes. The Spanish livestock consumed all the dry corn stalks in the fields. To the Spanish, it was just animal fodder. But to the Tiguex people, those dry stalks were their only source of fuel to survive the freezing winter.
Oh, wow.
The Spanish literally ate the village's ability to stay warm.
Add that existential threat to the fact that a Spanish soldier then assaults a Pueblo woman. That is the final spark. The Tiguex are pushed past their absolute limit, and violence erupts.
It becomes known as the Tiguex War.
A brutal, tragic winter of massacres, sieges, and the forced abandonment of several pueblos.
And after a winter of starvation, freezing temperatures, and horrific bloodshed, the Spanish morale is entirely broken. Understanding the psychological state is crucial for what happens next.
They are desperate.
Beyond desperate. They need a victory. They know returning to Mexico empty-handed after so much suffering will ruin them.
And desperation makes you the perfect mark for a con.
Oh, absolutely.
While at the Pecos Pueblo, they meet an enslaved Plains Indian. The Spanish call him the Turk simply because they thought he looked Turkish.
And the Turk looks at these starving, heavily armed, gold-obsessed Europeans, and he pitches them the exact story they're dying to hear.
He spins a masterful tale about a land to the east called Quivira. He claims there is a river 2 leagues wide, fish the size of horses, and so much gold that the common people drink from golden bowls.
And the Spanish, blinded by their desperate need for this nightmare to be worth something, swallow the story whole.
So in the spring of 1541, guided by the Turk, the entire army marches east. Imagine for a second you are standing in the Llano Estacado, the vast, flat plateau of the Texas Panhandle.
It's intimidating even today.
Right. Look in every direction. It is just a flat ocean of grass. The sensory deprivation of this landscape completely unmoors them. Our source, Pedro de Castañeda, wrote a description that gives me chills.
What did he say?
He said the country was so level and smooth that if a man lay down on his back, he lost sight of the ground.
The terror of that landscape for a European accustomed to mountains and rivers cannot be overstated. There are 0 landmarks. Castañeda noted that if you wandered just 50 feet away from the main group to hunt, you could instantly lose your sense of direction and disappear forever.
So how do they keep track of each other?
They resorted to piling up the bones of the humpbacked cows, which were American bison, just to leave a visible trail to find their way back to camp.
That is incredibly grim.
It is. They stumbled blindly until they hit massive, unexpected geographical features like the Palo Duro Canyon, a gorge that just drops away out of the flat earth.
Eventually, Coronado realizes the main army is consuming way too many supplies. So he sends the bulk of the force back to New Mexico and takes a smaller, faster group of about 30 horsemen, pushing forward for 42 more days straight north into Kansas.
And finally, they reach Quivira, the big reveal.
And the reality is just as crushing as Cibola, isn't it?
Oh, it's brutal. Quivira, located near modern-day Wichita, Kansas, is not a city of gold. It is a settlement of grass huts. The people are agriculturalists who hunt buffalo.
Did they find any metal at all?
The only metal they find in this entire fabled city of gold is a single piece of copper hanging from a chief's neck.
It is the ultimate high-stakes survival con. The Turk later confesses to the deception. He wasn't leading them to gold. He was intentionally leading them into the pathless plains, banking on the idea that they would wander in circles, exhaust their supplies, and starve to death.
It was a brilliant, desperate plot by the Pueblo people to rid themselves of the Spanish army. And for his deception, the Turk is executed.
Since the Turk led them on such a wild goose chase, how do modern historians actually know where Coronado went? I mean, if you're lost in a sea of grass, you aren't exactly leaving behind an accurate map.
You don't leave a map, but an army of 2,000 people leaves a lot of trash. This is where the archaeological surveys in our sources turn into a scientific detective story.
Right, the crossbows.
Exactly. We mentioned earlier that Coronado's expedition was the only major group to enter the Southwest carrying obsolete crossbows. By the time the next Spanish explorers arrived decades later, firearms had completely replaced them.
So if you find a 16th century copper crossbow point buried in the dirt in Kansas, you aren't just finding a generic Spanish artifact.
No, you have found a definitive metallic footprint of Francisco Vázquez de Coronado. Those points act like a timestamp.
And they found other things too, right?
Yes. Archaeologists have uncovered these distinct crossbow points, along with specific artifacts like carrot head horseshoe nails.
Carrot head?
Yeah, the carrot head shape was a very specific early 16th century Spanish farrier technique that was soon abandoned. Finding one proves early Spanish presence. They also found small brass ornaments called Clarksdale bells, which were a specific type of hawk bell used as trade goods during that exact decade.
And didn't they find chainmail somewhere?
At the Saxman site in Kansas, yes, they even found a rusted piece of chainmail. These metallic breadcrumbs allow us to trace the exact winding path of that moving city.
And the archaeology isn't just out on the plains. Back in New Mexico near Bernalillo, archaeologists excavated a site called LA 54147. Initially, it looked like a standard Native American site.
But then they started pulling up those exact same carrot head nails, a tiny clothing hook, and pieces of European metal.
What really struck me about that site was what the soil itself revealed.
The depressions in the ground.
Yeah. They found shallow, trash-filled depressions in the ground with hearths located both inside and outside the pits. These weren't permanent adobe homes.
No, these were the physical footprints of a massive, long-term cold-weather tent camp. It is the direct physical proof of the desperate winter occupation during the Tiguex War.
While Coronado is getting lost in Kansas and setting up these camps, what happened to the rest of the expedition? He says splintered off earlier, right?
Right, those side quests we touched on, they were incredible. A captain named Garcia Lopez de Cardenas was sent west, where his group became the first Europeans to view the Grand Canyon.
And they tried to climb down it and completely failed, which sounds crazy at first, but the sources explain it was a massive optical illusion.
The scale of the American desert is entirely alien to a 16th century European eye. From the rim, they estimated the Colorado River was about 6 feet wide. Yeah. When a few men tried climbing down, they realized that boulders near the bottom, which looked the size of a person from the top, were actually the size of the Tower of Seville in Spain. The sheer, incomprehensible depth defeated them.
And meanwhile, there was a naval component to this expedition trying to resupply them, led by Hernando de Alarcón.
Alarcón was sailing a fleet up the Gulf of California. He discovered the mouth of the Colorado River, but the current was so swift that his sails were useless. He couldn't navigate up it.
So how did he move?
To keep moving, Native Americans actually helped the Spanish haul the boats upriver against the current using thick ropes from the shore.
Our sources note that Alarcón named it the Firebrand River. And the reason is just wild. It was so freezing cold that the local Native Americans carried burning sticks, literally holding the fire close to their abdomens and shoulders to stay warm as they walked along the banks.
Alarcón traveled far up the river, hoping to find Coronado, but they never made contact. He eventually had to turn back.
But he left something behind.
Yes. Before leaving, he buried letters at the base of a tree, carving a message deep into the bark saying, "A letter is at the foot of this."
It's essentially a 16th century dead drop, a geographical geocache. And incredibly, a land commander named Melchior Diaz actually finds it.
It's such a coincidence.
Right. He was traveling west, spots the carved tree, digs up the letters, and realizes the resupply ships have abandoned the mission. But then tragedy strikes. Diaz dies on the return journey in a totally bizarre, avoidable accident.
Tell him about the lance.
He throws his lance at a dog that was attacking their sheep. His horse keeps running, and he accidentally falls onto the back end of his own lance.
It is a cascade of logistical and human failures, everywhere you look.
By the spring of 1542, after 2 years of wandering, brutal warfare, and starvation, Coronado realizes it is completely hopeless. The grand expedition packs up and begins the sad, grueling walk home.
And it is a depressing return.
When Coronado finally stumbles back into Mexico City, he has less than 100 men with him. He is physically broken from his injuries, completely bankrupt, and publicly disgraced. Viceroy Mendoza is furious about the massive lost investment.
Coronado loses his governorship and dies in obscurity at the age of 42. It is a spectacular failure.
In terms of its stated goal, absolutely. They did not find a single ounce of gold.
But for you, as a listener piecing this history together, the takeaway is how this one catastrophic failure completely rewired the continent.
They mapped a massive unknown region for Europe.
They did. They introduced horses and new diseases to the Great Plains. The Franciscan friars, who stayed behind, fundamentally altered the culture of the region. This single disastrous expedition effectively ended the prehistoric era of the American Southwest and violently dragged it into recorded history.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought from these sources. It's an irony so massive it's almost painful to think about.
The true wealth.
Yes. The Spanish spent years starving, fighting, and dying because they couldn't find shiny yellow metal. But while they were mourning the lack of gold, they were literally walking over the true wealth of the continent.
The journals show that the explorers clearly documented the incredibly rich, dark soil of the Great Plains. They had discovered what would eventually become the agricultural breadbasket of the entire world.
That soil was capable of generating wealth that makes Aztec gold look like pocket change.
And it gets even more ironic. A related Spanish expedition happening around the exact same time, the Moscoso expedition, was wandering through East Texas.
And their journals noted seeing a thick, black goo seeping out of the ground.
Petroleum.
Exactly. They discovered black gold, the energy source that would eventually power the modern world. They were standing on the breadbasket of the globe, staring at literal oil seeping from the dirt.
But they couldn't see it for what it was.
Because they were so obsessively blinded by the European desire for shiny yellow metal, they looked at the actual wealth of the continent, shrugged, and considered it completely worthless. You wander into the desert, you stare into the sun, and you only see the mirage you want to see. Everything else, no matter how valuable, just becomes dirt beneath your feet.